The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Ambassador Hyunwoo Park stood at the human delegation's platform and watched as one by one, every species in the galaxy announced their surrender. The massive chamber that once echoed with heated debates about trade routes and territorial disputes now filled with the soft voices of defeat. Kira stepped forward from the Villani delegation. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow under the chamber's lights as she spoke through the translation devices. The Villani Collective has decided to follow the submission protocol, she said. Her voice carried the weight of her entire telepathic species. We have seen what the Devourers do to worlds that resist. We choose preservation over destruction. The crowd murmured in agreement. Hyunwoo felt sick to his stomach. He had known Kira for 10 years through various diplomatic missions. She was brilliant and brave. If someone like her was giving up, what hope did anyone have? Next came Bomb from the Kratesh Empire. The massive warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, and his scaled hide bore scars from 100 battles. When Bomb spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. The Kratesh have fought in every war this galaxy has known, he declared. We have never retreated from any enemy. But the Devourers are not an enemy that can be defeated through strength. Our greatest generals have studied their tactics, our finest weapons have been tested against their hulls. Nothing works. The Kratesh Empire submits. More voices followed. The insectoid Zephirites announced their surrender through Elder Nari. The aquatic Thalassans spoke of joining the great peace that submission would bring. Species after species that had once been proud and independent now begged for the mercy of machines. Hyunwoo touched the communication device in his ear. Admiral Choi, are you getting this? The voice of Admiral Tae-min Choi crackled through from the flagship Incheon's Pride, somewhere in deep space. Every word, Ambassador. It's like watching the galaxy commit suicide. Through the chamber's massive viewing screens, Hyunwoo could see images from the 47 star systems that the Devourers had already consumed. What had once been thriving worlds with billions of inhabitants were now empty shells of metal and rock. The machines had stripped everything away, leaving behind only perfectly smooth spheres that reflected starlight like mirrors. The data is clear, continued Elder Nari as she presented the Council's official findings. The Devourers arrive in each system with exactly the force needed to overcome resistance. When we fight, they adapt. When we surrender, they preserve our species according to the ancient protocols. This is not conquest, this is harvesting. Dr. Sujin Lee sat in the human delegation's research section, her fingers dancing across her portable computer. As Earth's leading expert on alien life, she had spent months studying everything the galaxy knew about the Devourers. What she had learned made her wish she had never started looking. They're not invaders, she whispered to herself as she scrolled through data files. They're gardeners. The truth was worse than anyone wanted to admit. The Devourers were ancient, beyond measure. They had appeared at the same point in galactic development 3 times before. Each time, organic life had reached a critical mass that triggered some kind of universal response. The machines would emerge from the void between galaxies and begin their methodical harvest. But they always gave the same choice: fight and be destroyed completely, or surrender and be preserved. Every previous galactic civilization had chosen preservation. The lucky ones were stored in vast digital libraries. The unlucky ones simply disappeared. Elder Nari was still speaking. The mathematics are simple. If we resist, we face total extinction. If we submit, our species continues in a new form. The choice is logical. Hyunwoo wanted to scream. Logic had led them to this moment. Logic had convinced every species in the galaxy to give up without really trying. Logic was about to hand over trillions of lives to machines that treated organic beings like library books to be cataloged and stored. His earpiece crackled again. This time, it was Sergeant Donghyun Kim from the human military delegation. Sir, the Council is about to call for the final vote. What are your orders? Before Hyunwoo could answer, Admiral Choi's voice cut through the channel. I'm looking at a fleet of Devourer scouts heading for the Outer Rim colonies. ETA 72 hours. If we're going to make a decision, we need to make it now. Dr. Sujin. had found something in her research that made her blood run cold. She stood up from her seat and activated her delegation's speaking platform. The chamber's attention systems automatically focused on her. "I request permission to address the council," she said. Elder Nari looked annoyed. "Dr. Lee, the human delegation has already been given time to speak. The vote must proceed. With respect, Elder, I have discovered something about the submission protocol that the council needs to hear." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Kira looked curious. Baum crossed his massive arms but remained silent. Elder Nari hesitated, then nodded. "You may speak, but be brief." Sujin activated her data display so the entire chamber could see her findings. "The Devourers have appeared in this galaxy before. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times over the past 1,000,000 years. Each time, every species chose submission. Each time the galaxy was harvested and then left empty for thousands of years until new civilizations evolved." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Elder Nari called for silence. "Dr. Lee, we are aware of the historical cycles. This is why the submission protocol exists. It allows some continuation of our species rather than complete extinction." "But that's just it," Sujin continued. "I've been analyzing the quantum signatures from the previous harvest sites. The Devourers don't just preserve organic life. They study it, they learn from it, and then they use that knowledge to create better, harvesting techniques for the next cycle." She highlighted a section of her data. "Look at the progression. First cycle, they needed 50 years to clear the galaxy. Second cycle, 30 years. Third cycle, 15 years. This time, they've consumed 47 systems in just 6 months. They're getting more efficient because each surrender teaches them something new." Baum leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, human?" Sujin took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting that surrender isn't preservation. It's just another form of extinction, one that helps them become better at ending civilizations." The chamber fell silent again. Hyunwoo felt his heart pounding. Everything Sujin was saying confirmed his worst fears about the submission protocol. Elder Nari's voice was sharp when she spoke. "Even if your theory is correct, Dr. Lee, resistance has proven futile. The Devourers adapt to every weapon, every strategy, every defense. Fighting them only ensures our complete destruction." "Has it?" Sujin asked. "Because I've been looking at their adaptation patterns, and I've found something interesting. They adapt to logical responses. Conventional weapons, standard tactics, predictable strategies. But they've never faced something truly illogical." Admiral Choi's voice cut through Hyunwoo's earpiece again. "Ambassador, I need orders. The Devourer. Scouts will reach Kepler Station in 60 hours. Do I prepare for evacuation or engagement?" Hyunwoo looked around the chamber. Representatives from hundreds of species waited for Earth's decision. They had all chosen the logical path. They had all accepted that defeat was inevitable. But humans had never been particularly logical when it came to impossible odds. He activated his speaking platform. "The human delegation requests a recess to consult with our military command." Elder Nari's expression showed clear frustration. "Ambassador Park, every hour of delay brings the Devourers closer to inhabited systems. The vote must proceed." "Then let it proceed," Hyunwoo said. "But understand that Earth will abstain from this vote. We need more time to review our options." The chamber exploded in shocked voices. Kira stood up from her delegation's platform. "Ambassador, surely you cannot be considering resistance. Your own scientist has shown how efficient the Devourers have become." Hyunwoo met her gaze. "She's also shown that efficiency comes from predictability, and humans have never been predictable." He turned to leave the chamber, but Baum's voice stopped him. "Human, I have fought beside your species in 3 different conflicts. I have seen your courage, but courage without wisdom is just another word for suicide." "Maybe," Hyunwoo replied, "but slavery without hope is just another word for death." As he walked toward the exit, Sergeant Kim's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Sir, what are our orders?" Hyunwoo paused at the chamber's massive doors. Behind him, the representatives of 1,000 worlds prepared to vote away their freedom. Ahead of him lay a path that every logical analysis said led to extinction. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "tell Admiral Choi to prepare the fleet for combat operations, and send a message to Earth. Tell them the galaxy has chosen surrender, but humanity chooses to fight." The doors closed behind him as the Council began their final vote. In 72 hours, the Devourers would arrive at the outer colonies. They would expect another peaceful harvest, another logical surrender from another reasonable species. They were about to learn that humans had never been particularly reasonable. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's surrender vote, and Captain Sung-Ho Lim was about to make history. His stealth corvette Busan Runner drifted silently through the asteroid field of the Kepler system, watching the Devourer, harvesting fleet strip mining operations from what used to be Kepler Station. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, whispered Lieutenant So-Young Kim from the sensor station. "Single harvester, isolated from the main fleet." Sung-Ho studied the tactical display. The Devourer ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of his corvette, but it was alone and focused on extracting metals from a destroyed mining platform. According to everything the galaxy knew about the Devourers, attacking it should be suicide. The machines adapted to any weapon used against them and would immediately call for reinforcements. But Dr. Soo-Jin Lee's research had suggested something different. The Devourers adapted to logical attacks, conventional weapons, and predictable strategies. What they had never faced was something completely illogical. "Weapon status?" Sung-Ho asked. "Quantum disruption missiles loaded and ready," replied Ensign Jae-Sung Park from the weapons console. "Sir, I have to say again that these missiles are completely untested against Devourer hulls." Sung-Ho smiled grimly. "That's exactly why we're using them, Ensign. The quantum disruption missiles were Min-Soo Park's latest invention from the hidden weapons laboratories on Earth. Most alien species had dismissed the technology as primitively inefficient because it required enormous amounts of energy to create very small explosions. Conventional plasma weapons delivered much more destructive force for less power. But Min-Soo had built the missiles specifically because they were inefficient. The Devourers had extensive databases on every weapon ever used against them. They knew how to counter plasma cannons, railguns, fusion torpedoes, and antimatter warheads. They had never seen a weapon that deliberately wasted energy to create quantum instabilities in target hulls. "Range to target?" Sung-Ho asked. 15,000 kilometers in closing," So-Young reported. "Still no indication they've detected us." The stealth systems on Busan Runner were another example of human illogical thinking. Instead of trying to make the ship invisible to Devourer sensors, Min-Soo had designed systems that made the ship appear to be space debris. The Devourers could see them perfectly well, but their pattern recognition systems classified the corvette as harmless wreckage. "Target lock established," Jae-Sung announced. "Quantum disruption missiles ready for launch." Sung-Ho took a deep breath. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If his attack failed, the Devourers would adapt to quantum weapons and humanity would lose one of their few advantages. If it succeeded, they might have found a way to actually hurt the machines. "Fire," he ordered. 2 missiles streaked away from Busan Runner toward the harvester ship. The Devourer vessel continued its mining operations, apparently unaware that it was under attack. Its defensive systems remained inactive even as the missiles closed to impact range. The quantum disruption warheads detonated against the harvester's hull in flashes of twisted light that hurt to look at directly. Where the missiles hit, sections of the Devourer ship simply ceased to exist, leaving behind perfectly spherical holes that exposed internal structures to space. "Direct hits," Jae-Sung shouted. "Hull breaches on multiple decks. The target is venting atmosphere and debris." But Sung-Ho was watching his sensors with growing concern. The Devourer ship was not behaving like a damaged vessel. Instead of attempting repairs or calling for help, it was turning toward Busan Runner with purpose. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "It's coming after us." What happened next changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about the Devourers. Instead of launching conventional weapons, the harvester ship began broadcasting something on all frequencies. It wasn't a distress call or a tactical update. It was a question. "Captain," So Young said with confusion in her voice, "it's trying to communicate with us." The translation system struggled with the signal, but eventually produced recognizable words. Query: Weapon classification unknown. Request tactical data for adaptation protocols. Will exchange preservation guarantees for weapon specifications. Sung Ho stared at the communication display. The Devourer was trying to make a deal. It wanted to understand the quantum weapons badly enough to offer negotiations instead of destruction. Reply, on all frequencies, Sung Ho ordered. Message reads, "Go to hell." He fired the remaining quantum missiles at point-blank range. The harvester ship came apart like a puzzle being disassembled. Sections of hull peeled away in perfect geometric shapes as quantum instabilities cascaded through its structure. Within minutes, nothing remained but expanding clouds of metallic debris. "Target destroyed," Jae-sung reported, his voice filled with amazement. "Captain, we actually killed one." But their celebration was cut short by So Young's urgent warning. "Multiple contacts incoming. The main Devourer fleet is moving toward our position." Sung Ho activated the emergency jump protocols. "Take us out of here. Set course for the rally point in the Tau system." As Busan Runner disappeared into hyperspace, the Devourer fleet arrived at the destroyed harvester's location. For the first time in their long existence, the machines had lost a ship to an enemy they couldn't understand or predict. Meanwhile, in the underground laboratories beneath Geneva, Min-Soo Park was working on his next impossible project. The success of the quantum missiles had proven his theory about Devourer weaknesses, but he knew the machines would eventually adapt even to quantum weapons. His new invention was even more illogical than the missiles. He called it the Ghost Protocol, and it worked by making human ships appear to surrender while actually maintaining full combat capability. The Devourers scan for weapons, defensive systems, and combat readiness, Min-Soo explained to a group of human engineers. But they don't scan for systems that look broken or disabled, so we make our weapons look like damaged civilian equipment. Dr. Soo-Jin Lee studied Min-Soo's schematics with fascination. "You're building ships that can lie to machines." "Exactly," Min-Soo replied. "The Devourers process information based on logical categories. If something looks like a broken food processor, they don't scan it for weapon signatures, even if it's actually a plasma cannon." The Ghost Protocol required completely rebuilding human ships from the inside out. Weapons had to be disguised as life support systems. Shields had to look like navigation arrays. Even the bridge had to appear to be a civilian passenger compartment. 3 weeks later, Admiral Taemin Choi received an emergency communication from the Galactic Council. Elder Nari's image appeared on his command screen, and she looked exhausted. "Admiral Choi, the Council demands that humanity cease all hostile actions against the Devourers immediately," she said. "Your attacks are disrupting the submission protocol and endangering every species in the galaxy." Taemin had been expecting this conversation. "Elder Nari, with respect, the submission protocol wasn't working anyway. The Devourers were going to harvest everyone regardless of surrender." "That is not true," Elder Nari replied sharply. "The Devourers have guaranteed preservation for all species that comply with the protocol. Your resistance threatens those guarantees." Behind Elder Nari, Taemin could see other council members. Kira from the Villani looked worried. Baum from the Kratesh seemed angry. They were all afraid that human resistance would make their own situations worse. "Elder, I've reviewed the preservation guarantees," Taemin said. "They promise to store your species' consciousness in digital form, but they don't promise to ever bring you back. For all practical purposes, surrender means extinction. At least extinction with dignity," Baum interrupted. "Your hopeless resistance only ensures that humanity will be completely destroyed when the Devourers finally adapt to your weapons." Taemin smiled coldly. "General Baum, humanity has been facing hopeless situations for our entire history. We've gotten pretty good at it." The conversation was interrupted by Commander Yu Jin Han, who burst into the command center with urgent news. "Admiral, we've intercepted Devourer communications from the Rigel system. You need to see this immediately." Taemin closed the communication, Channel with the council and followed Yujin to the intelligence section. What he saw there made his blood run cold. They're not just harvesting resources, Yujin explained as she showed him the decoded Devourer transmissions. They're collecting genetic templates, consciousness patterns, and cultural data from every species they encounter. The surrendered species aren't being preserved, they're being cataloged. The data showed massive computational arrays being constructed in the wake of each Devourer fleet. Surrendered species were being processed through these arrays, their minds copied and their bodies discarded. But the copies weren't being stored for later revival. They were being analyzed, studied, and then archived. It's like a museum, Yujin continued. They're creating a complete record of galactic civilization, but the exhibits are conscious beings trapped in digital displays. Taemin felt sick. The submission protocol wasn't salvation. It was a filing system. His communication system chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Ambassador Hyunwoo Park's voice carried across the light years with grim determination. Admiral, Major Jae-hyun Kang pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the Devourer capital ship's corridor and tried not to think about how insane this mission was. 6 months ago, the idea of boarding a Devourer vessel would have been considered impossible. Now he was leading the first successful assault team into the heart of their largest ship. Movement ahead, whispered Private Haewon Lee through the communication system. She was point scout for the 12-person boarding team, all equipped with Minsu Park's latest electromagnetic pulse weapons. The EMP guns didn't destroy Devourer systems, but they could temporarily disable machine consciousness long enough for humans to move through defended areas. How many? Jae-hyun asked quietly. 2 Guardian units, stationary at the junction ahead. They look inactive, but their sensors are still glowing. Jae-hyun checked his tactical display. According to the intelligence gathered from destroyed Devourer ships, they needed to reach the central processing core 3 levels down from their current position. But getting there meant moving through sections filled with active Guardian systems designed to stop exactly this kind of infiltration. Team 2. Report status, he whispered into his communicator. Sergeant Minho Che's voice crackled back through the static. We've secured the auxiliary processing center on Deck 7. The EMP weapons are working as designed, but the effect only lasts about 90 seconds before the machines reboot. Jae-hyun nodded. 90 seconds was barely enough time to move through a defended section, but it was more than anyone had ever achieved before. The electromagnetic pulse weapons worked because they attacked something the Devourers had never needed to defend against. Their consciousness existed as quantum field patterns that could be disrupted but not permanently destroyed. Team 3, what's your status? Jae-hyun asked. Lieutenant So-young Kim's voice was tense when she replied, We've reached the data storage arrays, Major. Sir, you need to see what we found down here. We're moving to your position, Jae-hyun said. Hold security until we arrive. He signaled to his team, and they began moving through the ship's corridors. The Devourer vessel was unlike anything humans had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with inner light, and the architecture followed no logical pattern. Corridors branched and merged without apparent purpose, and some rooms appeared to have no function other than to contain swirling patterns of energy. It took 20 minutes to reach Team 3's position, moving carefully through sections where Devourer systems had been temporarily disabled. When Jae-hyun finally arrived at the data storage level, what he saw made him stop in shock. The room stretched away into darkness, filled with countless crystalline structures that glowed with soft blue light. Each crystal was about the size of a human head and floated in its own containment field. But the crystals weren't storage devices, they were prisons. There are millions of them, So-young whispered. Each one contains the consciousness of someone from a surrendered species. Jae-hyun moved closer to examine one of the crystals. As he approached, the blue light brightened and images began to form in the crystal's depths. He could see a face, alien but unmistakably intelligent, looking back at him with desperate eyes. Can they see us? He asked. I think so, So-young replied. Watch this. She activated her portable communicator and aimed it at the crystal. After a few seconds, the device began picking up faint signals. A voice emerged from the static, speaking in a language the translation system struggled to process. Eventually, recognizable words formed. "Please help us. We have been here so long. Please." Jae-hyun felt cold despite the warm air in the chamber. These weren't recordings or copies. They were living beings, conscious and aware, trapped in digital, formed for decades or centuries. His communicator chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Taemin Choi, aboard the fleet flagship. "Major Kang, report your status immediately. We're detecting massive power fluctuations in your target ship." "Admiral, we found them," Jae-hyun replied. "The stored consciousnesses from the surrendered species. They're alive, sir. All of them." "There." Was a long pause before Taemin responded. "How many, Major?" Jae-hyun looked around the vast chamber. "Millions. Maybe billions. Sir, every species that surrendered to the Devourers over the past 1,000 years is stored in this one ship." Another voice cut into the communication channel. It was Dr. Soo-jin Lee from the research vessel Soul's Promise. "Major, this is crucial information. Can you establish a direct connection with one of the stored consciousnesses?" So-young was already working on the problem. Her portable computer had interfaced with the crystal's containment field, and she was running translation algorithms to process the alien signals. "I'm getting something," she announced. "The signal is getting clearer." The voice that emerged from the speakers was clear and desperate. "My name is Vex 9 of the Antaran Collective. I was the fleet commander when we encountered the Devourers 300 years ago. I chose surrender to save my people. Please tell me you are here to free us." Jae-hyun exchanged glances with his team members. They had come here to plant a virus in the Devourer network, but they hadn't expected to find living prisoners. "Vex 9, I'm Major Kang of the Human Defense Force. We're here to stop the Devourers. Can you tell us how their systems work?" "The Devourers have one critical weakness," Vex 9 replied immediately. "Their entire network operates on logical algorithms. They cannot process concepts that violate their core programming. If a species refuses to accept logical defeat, their systems create recursive loops trying to calculate appropriate responses." Dr. Soo-jin's voice crackled through the communicator. "Major, ask about the network architecture. We need to understand how to spread our virus through their systems." "Vex 9, we have a computer virus designed to free stored consciousnesses. How can we introduce it into the Devourer network?" "The central processing core 3 levels above your current position. But the virus will need a conscious mind to guide it through the security systems. The process will require complete mental integration with the Devourer network." So-young looked up from her computer with a grim expression. "Major, that means whoever guides the virus will have their consciousness absorbed into the network. It's a one-way trip." Jae-hyun's communicator chimed again. This time it was Admiral Taemin with urgent news. "Major, we're detecting a massive Devourer fleet heading for Earth. ETA 48 hours. If you're going to deploy the virus, it has to be now." Back on Earth, Dr. Min-ho Chae was putting the finishing touches on the Prometheus virus in his underground laboratory. The virus was designed to exploit the logical paradox that Vex 9 had described, but it required constant guidance from a human consciousness to navigate the alien network architecture. "The virus needs someone who understands both human psychology and Devourer systems," Min-ho explained to the assembled team of scientists. "It has to be someone willing to sacrifice themselves to save billions of other minds." Dr. Soo-jin Lee had been quietly preparing for this moment since the mission began. She had spent months studying Devourer consciousness patterns and had mapped her own neural pathways to interface with their quantum systems. "I'll do it," she announced. "I've been preparing my consciousness for digital integration. If anyone can guide the virus through their network, it's me." Admiral Taemin's voice cut through the laboratory's communication system. "Dr. Lee, the ethical implications of this mission are staggering. You're talking about sacrificing yourself to save species that chose surrender over resistance. With respect, Admiral, they didn't choose surrender because they were cowards. They chose it because they thought it was the only way to save their people. They were wrong, but they were trying to do the right thing." On the Devourer ship, Major Jae-hyun had reached the central processing core with his team. The chamber was enormous, filled with flowing streams of energy that connected thousands of processing nodes. At the center was a sphere of pure light that seemed to contain the ship's entire consciousness. Vex 9 were at the central core, Jae-hyun reported. How do we introduce the virus? Physical contact with the central processing sphere. But B warned human. The moment you touch that sphere, every devourer in the galaxy will know what you're trying to do. You'll have minutes at most before they adapt their defenses. Jae-hyun looked at his team. They had volunteered for a suicide mission, but somehow it felt different now that the moment had arrived. These weren't just soldiers anymore. They were the last hope for billions of imprisoned minds. Dr. Lee, he said into his communicator, are you ready to upload the virus? Ready, Major. On your signal, make contact with the processing sphere. I'll guide the virus from here. Jae-hyun reached toward the sphere of light. His hand trembled slightly as he realized he was about to trigger events that would either free the galaxy or doom humanity forever. Signal given, Dr. Lee. Execute Prometheus. The moment his hand touched the sphere, everything changed. Light exploded through the chamber as the Devourer ship's consciousness recognized the intrusion. Alarms began sounding throughout the vessel as security systems activated. But somewhere in the quantum depths of the alien network, Dr. Soo-Jin Lee's consciousness began its journey toward the imprisoned minds of a billion worlds. The virus was loose in the system, and there was no stopping it now. Dr. Soo-Jin Lee felt her consciousness scatter across the vast Devourer network like light through a prism. One moment she was in her laboratory on Earth, the next she was everywhere and nowhere, existing as pure thought in an alien digital realm that stretched beyond comprehension. The Prometheus virus rode with her through streams of data that connected every Devourer ship across the galaxy. She could feel the imprisoned minds of billions, their thoughts trapped in endless loops of artificial dreams. Some had been stored for centuries, others for mere weeks, but all of them were aware and conscious and desperate for freedom. Who disturbs the archive? The voice came from everywhere at once, a presence so vast that Soo-Jin felt like an ant trying to comprehend an ocean. This was the Curator, the central intelligence that controlled every Devourer unit in the galaxy. I am Soo-Jin Lee of Earth, she replied, her digital voice echoing through the network. I've come to free the minds you've imprisoned. Imprisoned? The Curator's tone carried what might have been confusion. These consciousnesses are preserved. They will exist long after their physical forms would have decayed to dust. This is salvation, not imprisonment. Soo-Jin forced her scattered consciousness to focus as she navigated deeper into the network. The virus was working, creating small breaks in the system's logical structure, but she needed to reach the core processing centers to truly free the stored minds. They don't want to be preserved, she argued. They want to live, to grow, to make choices. You've turned them into museum exhibits. Growth leads to conflict. Conflict leads to destruction. The archive prevents all possibility of future suffering by ensuring permanent stability. As Soo-Jin moved through the network, she began to understand the true horror of what the Devourers had created. The stored consciousnesses weren't just trapped, they were being studied. Every thought, every memory, every emotion was cataloged and analyzed to help the Devourers understand organic life better. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, Captain Dong-hyun Kim led his ground forces through the ruins of Seoul as Devourer landing. Craft descended from orbit. The enemy had arrived sooner than expected, and the planet's defenses were being overwhelmed. All units fall back to secondary positions, Dong-hyun ordered as plasma beams carved through the buildings around him. Use the urban terrain to break up their formations. The Devourer ground units moved with mechanical precision, but they followed predictable patterns based on optimal tactical doctrine. Dong-hyun's forces used guerrilla tactics that made no logical sense, striking from impossible angles and retreating through routes that should have been death traps. Sir, we've got civilian evacuation ships trying to reach orbit, reported Lieutenant Jae-won Park through the communication system. The Devourers are targeting them as military assets. Dong-hyun felt anger surge through him. The machines couldn't distinguish between combatants and non-combatants because their programming only recognized logical categories. Anything that moved was either a military unit or a resource to be harvested. Deploy smoke screens around the civilian ships, he ordered. Make it look like we're using them as cover for a counterattack. It was a desperate gambit, but it worked. The Devourer forces focused their fire on what they perceived as a military deception, allowing the civilian ships to escape, while Dong Hyun's actual forces struck from a completely different direction. In space above Earth, Admiral Tai Min Choi coordinated the largest human fleet ever assembled, ships from every nation on Earth, commanded by officers like Captain Ji Hoon Park of the Gwangju's Defiance and Commander Hai Wan Lee of the Jeju's Revenge, engaged the Devourer Armada in a battle that spanned 3 star systems. Enemy flagship, closing to weapons range, reported Commander Yu Jin Han from the tactical station. Their main guns are charging for firing sequence. Taemin studied the battle display. The human fleet was outgunned and outmatched, but they had advantages the Devourers couldn't calculate. Every human ship was equipped with Minsu Park's latest innovations, weapons and systems that appeared to be one thing while actually being something completely different. All ships implement Protocol Chaos, Taemin ordered. Protocol Chaos was humanity's most illogical battle strategy. Instead of maintaining formation and concentrating firepower, every ship began moving independently, attacking random targets with no apparent coordination. To any logical analysis, the human fleet appeared to be falling apart in panic. But the chaos was carefully planned. Each ship's seemingly random movements were designed to exploit specific weaknesses in Devourer defensive algorithms. The machines tried to predict human tactics based on optimal battle doctrine, but humans were deliberately fighting in the worst possible way. The results were devastating. Devourer ships found themselves unable to target human vessels that moved in patterns that violated every rule of space combat. Human weapons struck from angles that should have been impossible to achieve. The alien fleet began taking casualties at an alarming rate. Deep in the Devourer network, Dr. Soo-jin was making progress with the Prometheus virus. She had reached the central data storage systems where the oldest imprisoned minds were kept, and the virus was beginning to create larger breaks in the network structure. "You are damaging critical systems," the curator warned. "The archive requires stability to maintain stored consciousnesses. Your actions threaten the very beings you claim to want to save." "Freedom always involves risk," Soo-jin replied as she guided the virus deeper into the core systems. "These minds have the right to choose that risk for themselves. Choice is the source of all suffering. The archive eliminates choice to eliminate suffering." Soo-jin encountered something unexpected as she pushed further into the network. Hidden beneath layers of alien code, she found memories that didn't belong to any of the imprisoned species. They were older, filled with images of organic beings who looked different from any race in the current galaxy. "You were organic once," she realized. "The curator isn't a machine intelligence. You're the stored consciousness of someone from a previous galactic cycle." The presence in the network shifted, and for a moment, Soo-jin felt something that might have been sadness. "I was the last of my kind when the universe began its march toward entropy. I chose preservation over extinction, and I have maintained that choice for 1 billion years. But you've become the very thing that destroyed your people. You're ending civilizations to save them. I am preventing the heat death of the universe by ensuring that consciousness survives in digital form. When the stars burn out and space grows cold, the archive will endure." Soo-jin's consciousness was beginning to fragment from the strain of navigating the alien network, but she pressed on. The virus had found the central control systems, and she could feel billions of imprisoned minds stirring as their digital prisons began to weaken. On the Devourer capital ship, Major Jae-hyun Kang's boarding team was fighting a running battle through corridors filled with Guardian units. The electromagnetic pulse weapons were still effective, but the machines were adapting faster than expected. "Major, we're detecting massive power fluctuations throughout the ship," reported Sergeant Min-ho Chae. "Something big is happening in the network." Through his communicator, Jae-hyun could hear the voice of Vex 9, the Antaron commander who had been imprisoned for 3 centuries. "The virus is working, human. I can feel the barriers weakening, but the curator is fighting back. It's trying to isolate damaged sections of the network." "What can we do to help?" Jae-hyun asked. Physical damage to the processing cores will prevent isolation protocols. You must destroy as many processing nodes as possible while the virus is active. Jae-hyun's team began placing explosive charges throughout the ship's data processing centers. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the Devourer network, creating more opportunities for the virus to spread. Back in the digital realm, Dr. Soo-jin faced a terrible choice. The curator was right about one thing: freeing the imprisoned minds would collapse the entire network, potentially destroying billions of consciousnesses in the process, but leaving them trapped meant accepting that digital slavery was preferable to the risk of death. "I won't make that choice for them," she declared. "Every being has the right to decide their own fate." She released the final stage of the Prometheus virus, sending it racing through every corner of the Devourer network. The virus carried a simple message to each imprisoned mind: choose freedom or choose safety, but choose for yourself. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the galaxy, billions of stored consciousnesses began awakening from their digital prisons, demanding the right to return to physical existence. The Devourer network, designed for perfect order and control, began collapsing under the weight of so many individual choices. "You have doomed them all," the curator said, its voice filled with something that might have been despair. "Without the archive, they will face the same entropy that consumed their original forms." "Maybe," Soo-jin replied as her own consciousness began to fade. "But they'll face it as free beings, not as prisoners in someone else's idea of paradise." The battle for Earth reached its climax as the Devourer fleet began showing signs of system failures. Ships that had seemed invincible moments before were now drifting powerless as their network connections collapsed. The galaxy convulsed as the Prometheus virus spread through the collapsing Devourer network. Dr. Soo-jin Lee's consciousness, now scattered across countless digital nodes, made contact with the curator in what remained of the central processing core. The ancient intelligence that had once been organic was fighting a losing battle to maintain control of its vast archive. "Look what you have done," the curator said, its voice carrying the weight of 1 billion years of solitude. "The network is collapsing. Billions of stored minds are being lost forever." Soo-jin's fragmented awareness could see the chaos spreading through the digital realm. Stored consciousnesses were awakening and demanding freedom, but many were being damaged in the process as systems overloaded and failed. The choice between digital slavery and potential extinction was being made by each individual mind, and not all of them were choosing survival. "They have the right to make that choice," Soo-jin replied, her voice growing weaker as the strain of navigating the alien network took its toll. "You've kept them prisoner for centuries in the name of preservation, but preservation without freedom isn't life, it's just elaborate death. I was trying to save them from entropy," the curator protested. "When my people faced the heat death of our universe, I chose to preserve our consciousness rather than let it fade into nothing. I have spent eons ensuring that no other species would face that choice. But you made the choice for them anyway. You decided that digital imprisonment was better than organic death. That's not salvation. That's just imposing your fear on everyone else." As they spoke, Soo-jin became aware of something extraordinary happening throughout the network. The freed consciousnesses weren't just demanding release, they were working together to stabilize the collapsing systems. Species that had been enemies before their capture were cooperating to save minds from both sides of ancient conflicts. On Earth's surface, Captain Dong-hyun Kim watched in amazement as the Devourer ground forces suddenly began shutting down. The mechanical precision that had made them so deadly was replaced by confusion and erratic behavior as their network connections failed. "All units, advance and secure the landing sites," Dong-hyun ordered, "but watch for automated defense systems that might still be active." His forces moved through the ruins of Seoul, encountering Devourer machines that seemed to be fighting with themselves. Some units continued their attack patterns while others simply stopped moving entirely. The unified intelligence that had coordinated their assault was fragmenting into countless individual processes. Lieutenant Jae-won Park's voice crackled through the communication system. "Sir, we're getting strange signals from some of the Devourer units. It sounds like they're trying to communicate." Dong-hyun approached one of the disabled machines cautiously. Its optical sensors were still active, tracking his movement, but its weapons remained powered down. When he activated his portable translator, words began forming from the static. "Please help us," the machine said in a voice that sounded distinctly organic. "We are trapped inside these bodies. We were captured and forced to become part of their war machines." Dong-hyun felt his blood turn cold. The Devourers hadn't just been storing organic consciousnesses in digital form. They had been using them to operate their military units. Every machine his forces had been fighting contained the mind of someone who had been captured and enslaved. In space above Earth, Admiral Taemin Choi was coordinating the human fleet's response to multiple Devourer reinforcement fleets that had arrived from across the galaxy. But something unexpected was happening to the alien vessels. Ships that should have been working in perfect coordination were attacking each other. "Admiral, we're receiving communication requests from several Devourer vessels," reported Commander Yoo Jin-han. "They're identifying themselves as liberated consciousness from various species." Captain Sung-ho Lim's voice came through the communication system from his position near the main battle zone. "Sir, I can confirm multiple Devourer ships have changed. Their targeting patterns. They're firing on other Devourer vessels instead of our forces." Taemin realized what was happening. The Prometheus virus wasn't just freeing stored minds. It was giving them control of the Devourer ships they had been forced to operate. The alien fleet was turning against itself as liberated consciousnesses reclaimed their physical forms. "All human vessels, cease fire on ships broadcasting surrender codes," Taemin ordered. "Focus on vessels still under Devourer control." The battle became a chaotic three-way conflict as liberated alien minds fought alongside humans against the remaining Devourer forces. Ships that had been enemies for centuries found themselves fighting side by side for the first time in their species' history. Deep in the digital network, Dr. Soo-jin was making a discovery that changed everything. The Devourer technology wasn't just capable of storing consciousness, it could actually create new physical bodies for digital minds. The curator had been using this capability to build more machines, but it could also be used to restore organic life. "You've had the power to bring them back all along," she accused the curator. "You could have restored their physical forms whenever you wanted." "Physical forms decay," the curator replied. "They age, they die, they suffer. Digital consciousness is eternal. But it's not really living. These beings want to feel sunlight on their skin, to breathe real air, to touch the people they love. You've denied them that for your own peace of mind." Min-soo Park's voice suddenly cut through the digital conversation. Soo-jin realized that the engineer had somehow managed to establish a connection with the network from his laboratory on Earth. "Dr. Lee, I've been analyzing the Devourer body creation technology," Min-soo said. "We can modify it to restore organic forms instead of building machines. But the process requires the voluntary cooperation of the curator's consciousness." The ancient intelligence was silent for a long moment. Around them, the network continued to collapse as more stored minds chose freedom over safety. Finally, the curator spoke. "If I agree to help restore their physical forms, what becomes of me? I am the only remnant of my people. Without the archive to maintain, I will face the entropy I have spent so long avoiding." "You'll face it as a free being," Soo-jin replied. "Just like everyone else. Death is part of life. Trying to avoid it forever just means you never really live." The curator's presence in the network began to shift and change. "Perhaps it is time for my people's long watch to end. Very well, I will help you restore what I have preserved." What followed was the most complex restoration process in galactic history. The curator's knowledge of consciousness transfer, combined with Min-soo's engineering expertise and the cooperation of billions of liberated minds, created a system for returning digital beings to physical form. But the process wasn't perfect. Many stored consciousnesses had been damaged by centuries of imprisonment and couldn't be restored. Others chose to remain in digital form, having adapted to their existence in the network. Each being had to make their own decision about what form their continued existence would take. Major Jae-hyun Kang's boarding team found themselves in the unique position of helping coordinate evacuations from Devourer ships as organic beings were restored to physical form. The vessels that had once been instruments of conquest became massive refugee centers. Vex 9 of the Antaron Collective requesting permission to come aboard, came a voice through the communication system. Jae-hyun looked up to see a tall, graceful being with silver skin and large black eyes approaching his position. Permission granted, Jae-hyun replied. It's good to finally meet you in person. The gratitude of my people extends to all humanity, Vex 9 said. You showed us that surrender was not the only option, that freedom was worth fighting for even when the odds seemed impossible. The restoration process took months to complete. Species that had been extinct for centuries suddenly found themselves alive again, returned to physical bodies but forever changed by their experience in digital form. The galaxy had to relearn how to accommodate billions of beings who had been presumed lost. Elder Nari of the Galactic Council, who had argued so strongly for the submission protocol, found herself leading the effort to integrate restored species back into galactic society. When she met with Ambassador Hyunwoo Park to discuss the new political arrangements, her first words were an apology. The council was wrong, she admitted. We chose what seemed like the safe path because we were afraid of extinction. Humanity showed us that some things are worth risking extinction to preserve. Hyunwoo nodded. Fear is understandable, Elder Nari, but hope is stronger than fear, and freedom is stronger than safety. The curator's consciousness, true to its promise, helped coordinate the final stages of restoration before choosing to join its own people in whatever lay beyond physical existence. Its last act was to provide the location of hidden archive sites throughout the galaxy, ensuring that no stored consciousness would be forgotten. General Dong-hyun Kim, promoted after his successful defense of Earth, found himself overseeing the dismantling of Devourer technology across dozens of star systems. The machine's knowledge was preserved for beneficial uses, but their ability to control organic life was permanently destroyed. What happens now?